The Neanderthal lineage emerged from the complex evolutionary dynamics of Middle Pleistocene Europe, representing one of the most successful hominin adaptations to glacial environments in human evolutionary history. Between 600,000 and 400,000 years ago, populations of Homo heidelbergensis scattered across the European continent began experiencing selective pressures that would fundamentally reshape their anatomy, physiology, and survival strategies. These ancestral groups, already established in regions spanning from the Iberian Peninsula to the Caucasus, found themselves confronting increasingly harsh climatic conditions as glacial cycles intensified during the Middle Pleistocene. The transformation from Homo heidelbergensis to early Neanderthal populations occurred gradually across multiple millennia, driven primarily by the demanding environmental conditions of glacial Europe. Archaeological evidence from sites such as Cima de los Huesos in Spain's Atapuerca Mountains provides crucial insights into this transitional period. The fossil remains discovered in these limestone caves, dating to approximately 430,000 years ago, display a mosaic of features that bridge the gap between Homo heidelbergensis and later Neanderthal populations. These early specimens exhibit enlarged nasal cavities, robust facial architecture, and the beginnings of the distinctive cranial morphology that would characterize fully developed Neanderthals. The European landscape during this period presented formidable challenges that shaped every aspect of Neanderthal evolution. Massive ice sheets periodically advanced southward from Scandinavia, creating tundra-like conditions across much of northern and central Europe. Even during interglacial periods, temperatures remained significantly cooler than modern levels, and the landscape was dominated by coniferous forests, grasslands, and periglacial environments. These conditions demanded sophisticated adaptations for thermal regulation, efficient caloric extraction from available food sources, and the ability to manufacture complex tools for hunting large game animals. Neanderthal cranial morphology reflects these environmental pressures through several distinctive features that emerged during this evolutionary process. The characteristic projecting mid-face, with its prominent nasal aperture and inflated maxillary sinuses, served as an efficient warming and humidifying chamber for cold, dry air. This adaptation prevented respiratory heat loss and protected delicate lung tissue from the harsh conditions of glacial Europe. The robust supraorbital ridges and thick cranial bones provided structural support for powerful masticatory muscles, enabling Neanderthals to process tough, fibrous plant materials and extract maximum nutrition from available resources. The postcranial skeleton underwent equally significant modifications during this evolutionary trajectory. Neanderthal limb bones developed exceptional robusticity, with enlarged muscle attachment sites reflecting the demanding physical lifestyle required for survival in glacial environments. Their barrel-shaped ribcage expanded lung capacity for efficient oxygen processing in cold conditions, while shortened limb proportions minimized surface area for heat loss. These adaptations created a body plan optimized for strength, endurance, and thermal efficiency, rather than the long-distance running capabilities that characterize contemporary African hominin populations. Genetic analysis of Neanderthal DNA extracted from fossil remains has revealed the molecular basis of their divergence from the African lineage leading to modern humans. This separation occurred approximately 500,000 to 600,000 years ago, establishing distinct evolutionary trajectories that would persist until Neanderthal extinction roughly 40,000 years ago. The genetic evidence confirms that Neanderthal populations developed in isolation from African hominins, evolving unique adaptations to European and Western Asian environments without significant gene flow from southern populations. The initial geographic distribution of early Neanderthal populations extended across a vast range of European territories, from the Atlantic coastlines of Portugal and France to the foothills of the Ural Mountains in Western Asia. Archaeological sites dating to the earliest phases of Neanderthal evolution have been discovered throughout this region, indicating rapid colonization and successful adaptation to diverse ecological niches. The Pontnwyd Cave in Wales provides evidence of Neanderthal presence in northwestern Europe by 230,000 years ago, while sites in the Caucasus Mountains demonstrate their expansion into Western Asia during similar timeframes. Climate fluctuations during the Middle Pleistocene created a dynamic landscape that influenced Neanderthal distribution patterns and population movements. During glacial maxima, Neanderthal populations retreated to refugia in southern Europe, including the Iberian Peninsula, Italy, and the Balkans. These regions provided relatively stable environments with access to diverse resources, allowing populations to maintain genetic diversity and technological traditions through harsh climatic periods. As glaciers retreated during interglacial phases, Neanderthal groups expanded northward, recolonizing territories across Central and Northern Europe. The technological capabilities of early Neanderthal populations reflected their sophisticated understanding of stone tool production and resource management. The development of Levallois technique during this period represents a significant cognitive advancement, requiring complex planning and spatial reasoning to produce predetermined tool forms from carefully prepared stone cores. This technology provided Neanderthals with efficient cutting implements, projectile points, and specialized tools for processing animal hides, woodworking, and other essential survival tasks. Neanderthal hunting strategies evolved in response to the megafauna that dominated Pleistocene Europe. Massive herbivores such as woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceros, cave bears, and giant deer provided substantial caloric resources, but required coordinated group efforts and sophisticated weapons for successful procurement. Archaeological evidence from sites like Schöningen in Germany reveals the use of wooden spears dating to 400,000 years ago, demonstrating early Neanderthal capabilities in manufacturing composite hunting weapons. The social organization of early Neanderthal groups likely centered around small, mobile bands capable of responding quickly to changing environmental conditions and resource availability. These groups maintained territories encompassing diverse ecological zones, allowing access to seasonal resources and reducing competition with neighboring populations. Evidence from cave sites suggests that Neanderthals established semi-permanent base camps in protected locations, using these sites repeatedly over extended periods while maintaining smaller temporary camps for specialized activities such as hunting or raw material procurement. Neanderthal adaptation to European environments also involves sophisticated understanding of fire production and management. Controlled use of fire provided essential advantages for survival in cold climates, including warmth, protection from predators, food processing capabilities, and extended daylight hours for tool production and social activities. Archaeological evidence from sites such as Beech's Pit in England and Vertezolos in Hungary demonstrates Neanderthal fire use dating to the earliest phases of their evolutionary development. The dietary strategies of early Neanderthal populations reflected their opportunistic approach to resource exploitation in challenging environments. While large game hunting provided the foundation of their subsistence economy, Neanderthals also incorporated plant foods, marine resources, and smaller animals into their diet when available. Isotopic analysis of Neanderthal bone collagen indicates heavy reliance on animal protein, consistent with the limited plant productivity of glacial European ecosystems. Neanderthal populations developed distinctive burial practices during their evolutionary trajectory, representing some of the earliest evidence of symbolic behavior among hominin species. Sites such as La Chapelle aux Saints in France and Shanidar Cave in Iraq contain intentional burials with evidence of grave goods and ceremonial treatment of the deceased. These practices suggest complex social relationships and possibly rudimentary spiritual beliefs within Neanderthal communities. The expansion of Neanderthal populations into Western Asia occurred through multiple migration events, establishing populations in regions spanning from the Levant to Central Asia. The Dmanisi site in Georgia provides evidence of early hominin presence in this region, while later Neanderthal sites such as Teshik Tash in Uzbekistan demonstrate their successful adaptation to diverse Asian environments. These eastern populations maintained genetic and cultural connections with European groups while developing regional variations in tool technologies and subsistence strategies. The anatomical blueprint of Neanderthal populations represented a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering, sculpted by hundreds of thousands of years of selective pressure in the unforgiving environments of glacial Europe and Western Asia. Their skeletal architecture differed fundamentally from contemporary hominin populations, displaying a suite of characteristics that maximize survival efficiency in cold, resource-scarce landscapes where physical strength and metabolic conservation determined life or death. The Neanderthal skull immediately distinguished itself through its robust construction and distinctive morphological features. The cranial vault exhibited exceptional thickness, with bone walls measuring up to twice the density of modern human skulls. This reinforced structure supported massive temporalis muscles that generated crushing bite forces exceeding 1,800 pounds per square inch, enabling Neanderthals to process tough, fibrous materials and extract maximum nutritional value from challenging food sources. The supraorbital torus formed a continuous, shelf-like projection above the eye sockets, creating deep-set orbital cavities that protected the eyes from harsh winds and reflected sunlight off snow and ice. Behind the prominent brow ridges, Neanderthal brain cases housed remarkably large brains, averaging 1,520 cubic centimetres in volume, with some specimens reaching 1,750 cubic centimetres. This cranial capacity exceeded that of most modern human populations, though the brain's internal organisation differed significantly. The occipital region projected backward in a distinctive bulge known as the occipital bun, creating additional space for enlarged visual processing centres and cerebellar regions responsible for motor coordination and balance. This neurological architecture supported the complex spatial reasoning required for three-dimensional navigation through varied terrain and precise tool manipulation in challenging conditions. The mid-facial region underwent dramatic modifications that transformed Neanderthal respiratory anatomy into a sophisticated climate control system. The nasal aperture expanded to enormous proportions, creating cavernous internal spaces lined with extensive turbinate bones that increased surface area for warming and humidifying incoming air. The maxillary sinuses inflated far beyond modern human dimensions, forming balloon-like chambers that preheated frigid air before it reached the lungs. This adaptation prevented respiratory heat loss and protected delicate alveolar tissue from the desiccating effects of cold, dry atmospheric conditions. Mid-facial prognathism projected the entire central facial region forward, creating a distinctive muzzle-like profile that housed the enlarged respiratory apparatus. The nasal bones formed a prominent ridge extending from the frontal region to the nasal tip, supporting the expanded breathing passages while providing structural integrity for the projecting face. The infraorbital foramina, openings that allowed passage of facial nerves and blood vessels, enlarged significantly to accommodate increased circulation to the cold exposed facial tissues. Neanderthal dental architecture reflected both their demanding dietary requirements and the harsh environmental conditions they endured. The incisors expanded to massive proportions, with central incisors measuring up to 50% larger than those of contemporary human populations. These shovel-shaped teeth served multiple functions beyond food processing, acting as tools for gripping materials, processing plant fibers, and manipulating objects during tool production. The distinctive scooping shape of the lingual surface increased surface area for more efficient food processing, while providing additional strength for non-dietary applications. Taurodontism characterized Neanderthal molar morphology, with enlarged pulp chambers extending deep into the tooth roots. This adaptation increased the tooth's resistance to fracture under extreme bite forces while providing additional space for nerve and blood vessel networks that maintain dental health in challenging conditions. The molar crowns displayed complex cusp patterns optimized for grinding tough plant materials and crushing bone to extract marrow, reflecting the diverse dietary strategies necessary for survival in resource-limited environments. Dental wear patterns reveal the extraordinary demands placed on Neanderthal teeth throughout their lifetimes. Severe attrition affected all tooth surfaces, with many specimens showing wear extending to the pulp chambers by middle age. The pattern of wear indicated extensive use of teeth as tools, with distinctive grooves and scratches resulting from processing plant fibers, softening animal hides, and manipulating stone and wooden implements. Despite this intensive use, Neanderthal teeth rarely showed evidence of caries or other pathological conditions, suggesting a diet low in refined carbohydrates and high in abrasive materials that naturally clean tooth surfaces. The postcranial skeleton displayed equally impressive adaptations to cold climate survival. Neanderthal long bones achieved extraordinary robusticity through increased cortical thickness and enlarged muscle attachment sites that supported massive musculature. The femoral shaft walls measured up to 40% thicker than modern human equivalents, while the cross-sectional area increased dramatically to resist the bending forces generated by powerful leg muscles during locomotion across uneven terrain. These adaptations created limbs capable of generating tremendous force while maintaining structural integrity under extreme stress. Limb proportions followed the principles of Allen's rule, with shortened extremities that minimize surface area for heat loss. Neanderthal humeri and femora measured significantly shorter than those of contemporary African populations, while the forearms and lower legs showed even more dramatic reduction in length. This body plan concentrated mass near the core, while reducing the extremities most vulnerable to frostbite and heat loss. The shortened limbs also lowered the centre of gravity, improving stability and balance on ice-covered surfaces and steep terrain. The thoracic cage underwent substantial modification to support the increased metabolic demands of cold climate survival. Neanderthal rib cages expanded both laterally and anteroposteriorly, creating a barrel-shaped torso that maximised lung capacity and internal organ space. The enlarged thoracic cavity accommodated lungs with increased surface area for oxygen exchange, essential for maintaining aerobic metabolism during intense physical activity in oxygen-poor, high-altitude environments. The expanded chest also provided additional space for the liver and kidneys, organs that worked over time to process the high-protein diet and metabolic byproducts of cold adaptation. Muscle mass distribution reflected the specific demands of Neanderthal lifestyle and environment. The shoulder girdle supported exceptionally developed deltoid, trapezius, and latissimus dorsi muscles that generated powerful throwing and striking motions for hunting and tool use. Enlarged pectoral muscles provided the strength necessary for close-quarters combat with large prey animals, while hypertrophied back muscles supported the spine during heavy lifting and carrying activities. The nuchal ridge at the base of the skull expanded to anchor massive neck muscles that stabilized the heavy head during vigorous physical activity. The pelvic architecture displayed distinctive features that reflected both locomotory adaptations and the demands of reproduction in harsh environments. Neanderthal pelvises showed increased robusticity throughout all elements, with thickened iliac blades and enlarged muscle attachment sites for the powerful gluteal muscles that drove locomotion up steep slopes and across difficult terrain. The pelvic inlet maintained adequate dimensions for childbirth despite the overall increase in robusticity. Though the birth process likely required longer gestation periods and produced larger, more developed infants capable of surviving harsh postnatal conditions, hand morphology revealed sophisticated adaptations for tool manipulation and environmental interaction. Neanderthal fingers displayed increased robusticity with enlarged muscle attachments for the flexor and extensor muscles that controlled grip strength and fine motor control. The thumb showed particular development, with a robust first metacarpal and enlarged thenar muscles that generated powerful precision grips essential for stone tool production and use. The fingertips expanded to support enlarged tactile pads that enhanced sensory feedback during tool manipulation in cold conditions when tactile sensitivity was naturally reduced. The vertebral column adapted to support the increased body mass and muscle development characteristic of Neanderthal populations. Individual vertebrae enlarged throughout the spinal column with expanded vertebral bodies and robust neural arches that resisted compression forces. The cervical vertebrae showed particular enlargement to support the heavy skull and powerful neck musculature, while the lumbar region developed enhanced lordotic curvature that maintained balance despite the forward projection of the facial region and enlarged chest. Metabolic adaptations complemented the structural modifications to create an integrated system optimized for cold climate survival. Neanderthal basal metabolic rate exceeded that of modern humans by an estimated 15 to 20%, generating additional heat production essential for maintaining core body temperature in sub-freezing conditions. This elevated metabolism required increased caloric intake, driving the development of efficient hunting strategies and dietary diversification that characterized Neanderthal subsistence patterns. The circulatory system underwent modifications to support enhanced heat distribution and prevent cold-related tissue damage. Archaeological evidence suggests enlarged heart capacity to pump increased blood volumes, while peripheral circulation adapted to maintain blood flow to extremities during cold exposure. The nasal passages contained extensive vascular networks that rapidly warmed incoming air, while enlarged facial blood vessels provided efficient heat exchange systems that prevented facial frostbite during extreme weather exposure. Neanderthal skin likely displayed adaptations for cold climate survival, though direct evidence remains limited due to preservation constraints. Comparative analysis with modern cold-adapted populations suggests increased subcutaneous fat deposits for insulation, enhanced sebaceous gland activity for skin protection, and possibly increased melanin production in sun-exposed areas to prevent UV damage reflected from snow and ice surfaces. Hair distribution probably emphasized insulation, with dense body hair providing additional thermal protection during extreme weather events. The integration of these physical adaptations created a hominin species uniquely suited to the challenging environments of Pleistocene Europe and Western Asia. Every aspect of Neanderthal anatomy reflected hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary refinement, producing populations capable of thriving in conditions that would prove fatal to less adapted hominin species. These remarkable physical characteristics enabled Neanderthals to establish successful populations across vast geographic ranges and persist through multiple glacial cycles that eliminated numerous contemporary species from the European landscape. The geographic footprint of Neanderthal populations extended across a vast territorial expanse that encompassed the diverse landscapes of Western Eurasia, from the windswept Atlantic coastlines to the harsh mountain valleys of Central Asia. This distribution represented one of the most extensive ranges occupied by any hominin species outside of Africa, spanning approximately 4,000 kilometers from east to west and covering latitudes from the Mediterranean basin to the subarctic regions of northern Europe. The establishment and maintenance of populations across such varied environments demonstrated remarkable adaptive flexibility and sophisticated migration strategies that enabled Neanderthals to exploit ecological niches unavailable to their contemporaries. The western boundaries of Neanderthal territory reached the Atlantic shores of Portugal and Spain, where archaeological sites such as Gruta de Oliveira and El Cidron provide evidence of sustained occupation dating back over 100,000 years. These coastal populations developed specialized subsistence strategies that incorporated marine resources alongside traditional terrestrial hunting and gathering activities. Shell middens and marine mammal remains indicate systematic exploitation of intertidal zones, while the distinctive lithic assemblages from these regions show technological adaptations for processing seafood and manufacturing fishing implements. Moving eastward from the Iberian Peninsula, Neanderthal populations established dense concentrations throughout France, where over 200 archaeological sites document continuous occupation spanning from approximately 250,000 to 30,000 years ago. The French landscape provided ideal conditions for Neanderthal settlement, with limestone cave systems offering natural shelter, abundant flint deposits for tool production, and diverse ecological zones supporting varied subsistence strategies. The Dordogne region alone contains dozens of major Neanderthal sites, including La Ferracie, Le Moustier, and Combes-Grenal, each revealing distinct phases of occupation that track population movements and technological developments across millennia. The British Isles represented the northwestern frontier of Neanderthal expansion, with populations crossing the land bridge that periodically connected Britain to continental Europe during glacial periods. Sites such as Pontnewid Cave in Wales and Swanscombe in Kent document Neanderthal presence, dating to approximately 230,000 years ago, though occupation appears to have been intermittent and closely tied to climatic fluctuations. During glacial maxima, rising sea levels and advancing ice sheets forced abandonment of British territories, while interglacial warming periods enabled recolonisation from continental populations. Central European territories form the demographic heartland of Neanderthal populations, with extensive archaeological evidence from Germany, Austria, Czech Republic, and surrounding regions documenting intensive occupation and technological innovation. The Neander Valley itself, where the first recognised Neanderthal remains were discovered, represents just one of hundreds of sites scattered across the region's river valleys and limestone formations. German sites such as Ehringsdorf, Salzgitter, Lebenstedt and Königsauer reveal sophisticated hunting strategies targeting large herbivores, including woolly rhinoceros, bison and red deer, while extensive lithic assemblages demonstrate advanced stone tool technologies. The eastward expansion of Neanderthal populations into the vast territories of Eastern Europe and Western Asia occurred through multiple migration waves that established genetically distinct regional populations. Archaeological sites in Poland, such as Siemna Cave and Pietrusyn, document Neanderthal presence extending to approximately 50,000 years ago, while Ukrainian sites including Molodova and Kikoba provide evidence of specialized mammoth hunting strategies adapted to the open steppe environments. These eastern populations developed distinctive tool technologies and settlement patterns that reflected adaptation to the challenging conditions of continental interiors. The Caucasus Mountains served as a crucial corridor for Neanderthal expansion into Western Asia, with sites such as Mezmatskaya Cave in Russia and Ortval Slalde in Georgia documenting sustained occupation from approximately 200,000 to 40,000 years ago. The mountainous terrain provided abundant cave shelters and diverse ecological zones ranging from temperate forests to alpine meadows, supporting varied subsistence strategies and enabling population persistence through climatic fluctuations. Genetic analysis of Caucasian Neanderthal remains reveals distinct lineages that maintained connections with both European and Asian populations, while developing regional characteristics. The southern limits of Neanderthal distribution extended throughout the Mediterranean basin, encompassing the Italian peninsula, the Balkans, and parts of Greece and Turkey. Italian sites such as Grotta Guattari, Sacco Pastore and Grotta di Fumane document continuous Neanderthal occupation spanning over 150,000 years, with populations exploiting the relatively stable Mediterranean climate and diverse resource base. The Italian populations developed sophisticated hunting strategies targeting both large game and smaller animals, while coastal sites reveal systematic exploitation of marine resources, including shellfish and marine mammals. Balkan populations occupied strategic territories that served as refugia during harsh glacial periods, maintaining genetic diversity and cultural traditions that enabled rapid expansion during interglacial warming phases. Sites such as Krapina in Croatia, Vindija Cave, and Sandalja reveal complex occupation sequences with evidence of advanced tool technologies, symbolic behaviour, and sophisticated settlement strategies. The region's diverse topography provided access to varied ecological zones within relatively small geographic areas, reducing the risks associated with resource scarcity and environmental fluctuations. The easternmost extent of confirmed Neanderthal presence reached the Altai Mountains of southern Siberia, where Denisova Cave and Okladnikov Cave have yielded Neanderthal remains and artifacts dating to approximately 50,000, that 60,000 years ago. These populations represented the culmination of eastward expansion across the Eurasian landmass, establishing communities over 4,000 kilometres from the Western European core populations. The Altai Neanderthals developed unique technological adaptations for survival in extreme continental climates, with specialised toolkits for processing animal hides and manufacturing cold-weather clothing. The Levantine corridor connecting Africa and Eurasia witnessed complex population dynamics involving multiple hominin species, including Neanderthals, early modern humans, and possibly other archaic populations. The Levantine Neanderthals maintained genetic connections with European populations, while developing regional adaptations to semi-arid environments and different prey species. Population density variations across Neanderthal territories reflected the complex interplay between environmental conditions, resource availability, and climatic fluctuations. During interglacial periods, populations expanded northward into previously uninhabitable regions, establishing settlements in Scandinavia, northern Britain, and the Russian plains. Archaeological evidence suggests peak population densities occurred in regions with optimal combinations of shelter availability, raw material sources, and diverse resource bases, particularly in the limestone cave regions of France, Spain, and the Balkans. Glacial periods triggered dramatic population contractions as advancing ice sheets eliminated vast areas of suitable habitat and forced migrations towards southern refugia. The Iberian Peninsula, Italian Peninsula, and Balkan regions served as primary refugial areas where populations maintained genetic diversity and technological traditions through harsh climatic phases. These refugial populations developed intensified resource exploitation strategies and increased site reuse patterns as available territories contracted and competition for resources intensified. The temporal patterning of Neanderthal distribution reveals sophisticated migration strategies that tracked environmental changes across multiple glacial cycles. Populations demonstrated remarkable mobility, with genetic evidence indicating gene flow across vast distances and rapid recolonization of previously abandoned territories during favourable climatic phases. This mobility required detailed environmental knowledge, including understanding of seasonal resource patterns, migration routes of prey species, and locations of raw material sources across extensive geographic ranges. Regional population differentiation developed over time as geographic barriers and distance limited gene flow between distant populations. Morphological analysis reveals subtle but consistent differences between Western European, Eastern European, and Western Asian populations, reflecting local adaptation to specific environmental conditions and genetic drift in isolated populations. Despite these regional variations, genetic analysis confirms that all Neanderthal populations remained part of a single species with maintained reproductive compatibility across their entire range. The demographic structure of Neanderthal populations likely consisted of small, mobile groups ranging from 15 to 30 individuals that maintained territories encompassing diverse ecological zones. These groups practiced seasonal mobility patterns that maximised access to resources while minimising competition with neighbouring populations. Archaeological evidence suggests periodic aggregation of multiple groups at favourable locations during peak resource availability, enabling mate exchange, information sharing, and cultural transmission across broader population networks. Settlement pattern analysis reveals sophisticated territorial organisation with hierarchical site use, reflecting different functional activities. Large cave sites served as residential bases occupied repeatedly over extended periods, while smaller rock shelters and open-air sites functioned as temporary camps for specialised activities such as hunting, raw material procurement, or tool production. This settlement system enabled efficient exploitation of resources across varied landscapes, while maintaining flexibility to respond to environmental changes and resource fluctuations. The northern limits of Neanderthal distribution fluctuated dramatically with climatic conditions, reaching as far north as southern Scandinavia during warm interglacial periods, but contracting to Central European refugia during glacial maxima. Sites such as Salzgitter Lebensstätte in northern Germany document Neanderthal presence at approximately 55 degrees north latitude during favourable climatic phases, representing adaptation to subarctic conditions with limited daylight hours and extreme seasonal temperature variations. Southern expansion into North Africa remains contentious, with limited and disputed evidence for Neanderthal presence south of the Mediterranean basin. While some researchers have proposed Neanderthal occupation of Morocco and Algeria based on lithic assemblages and fragmentary remains, the majority of evidence supports restriction of Neanderthal populations to regions north of the Sahara Desert. The absence of confirmed Neanderthal remains from sub-Saharan Africa reinforces the European and Western Asian origin and distribution of these populations. The complex mosaic of Neanderthal distribution across Western Eurasia reflects hundreds of thousands of years of successful adaptation to diverse and challenging environments. From the temperate forests of Western Europe to the harsh continental steppes of Central Asia, Neanderthal populations developed sophisticated strategies for survival that enabled them to establish one of the most extensive geographic ranges of any extinct hominin species. This remarkable distribution demonstrates their evolutionary success and adaptive flexibility in the face of dramatic environmental changes that eliminated numerous contemporary species from the Eurasian landscape. The technological achievements of Neanderthal populations represented a sophisticated understanding of raw material properties, manufacturing techniques, and functional design that enabled survival in the demanding environments of Pleistocene Eurasia. Their tool-making traditions, collectively known as the Mousterian industry, demonstrated remarkable consistency across vast geographic ranges, while simultaneously exhibiting regional variations that reflected local adaptations and cultural preferences. These stone tool assemblages, spanning approximately 300,000 to 30,000 years ago, reveal a level of technological complexity that required advanced cognitive abilities, detailed planning, and precise motor control. The foundation of Neanderthal stone tool technology rested upon the mastery of prepared core techniques, particularly the Levallois method, which represented a revolutionary advancement in lithic production. This technique involved the careful preparation of stone cores through a series of predetermined flake removals that shaped the core's surface geometry before striking off the desired tool blank. The process required sophisticated three-dimensional visualization, as the napper had to envision the final tool form while executing a complex sequence of preparatory strikes. The Levallois technique enabled Neanderthals to produce standardized tool blanks with predictable shapes and sharp cutting edges, maximizing the utility obtained from each piece of raw material. The execution of Levallois reduction began with the selection of appropriate raw materials, typically high-quality flint, chert, or quartzite nodules with fine-grained, homogeneous structures. Neanderthal nappers demonstrated intimate knowledge of stone properties, selecting materials based on fracture predictability, edge retention, and availability within their territorial ranges. The initial core preparation involved establishing a striking platform through careful removal of the cortex and creation of a flat surface perpendicular to the intended flaking direction. Subsequent flake removals shaped the core's convex upper surface, creating the precise angles necessary for successful tool blank detachment. The striking of the final Levallois flake required exceptional skill and timing, as the napper had to deliver a precisely controlled blow that would travel across the prepared surface and detach a flake with predetermined dimensions. Successful execution produced elongated flakes with sharp lateral edges, minimal dorsal ridges, and platforms suitable for hafting or handheld use. These blanks served as the foundation for further tool modification, with Neanderthals employing secondary retouch techniques to create specialized implements tailored to specific functional requirements. Regional variations within Mysterian assemblages reflected both environmental adaptations and cultural traditions that developed across different Neanderthal populations. The Kina Mysterian, identified primarily in southwestern France, emphasized the production of thick, heavily retouched scrapers with steeply angled working edges. These tools exhibited intensive use wear patterns, indicating prolonged use for hide processing, woodworking, and plant material preparation. The manufacturing technique involved extensive secondary retouch that created robust implements capable of withstanding repeated use and resharpening cycles. Keener assemblages typically contained high frequencies of side scrapers, transverse scrapers, and denticulated pieces, suggesting specialized activities related to resource processing and material preparation. The Farasi Mysterian tradition, also concentrated in southwestern France but extending into northern Spain, displayed different technological priorities, emphasizing the production of elongated tools with minimal retouch. These assemblages contained higher frequencies of naturally backed knives, points, and convergent scrapers produced through careful core preparation and precise flake removal. The Farasi tradition demonstrated greater emphasis on tool standardization and blade-like proportions, possibly reflecting different functional requirements or cultural preferences within regional Neanderthal populations. Typical Mysterian assemblages, found throughout the broader geographic range of Neanderthal populations, represented a more generalized tool-making tradition that combined elements from various regional styles. These assemblages contained balanced proportions of scrapers, points, and denticulated pieces, with moderate levels of secondary retouch and diverse core reduction strategies. The technological flexibility evident in typical Mysterian sites suggests adaptive responses to varied environmental conditions and resource availability across different territories. The production of composite tools represented one of the most sophisticated aspects of Neanderthal technology, requiring coordination of multiple raw materials and complex manufacturing processes. Archaeological evidence from sites such as Königsau in Germany and Campitello in Italy demonstrates the systematic use of organic hafting materials, including wood, bone, and processed animal sinew. The creation of hafted implements involved careful selection of handle materials, precise shaping of both stone and organic components, and secure binding techniques that could withstand the stresses of repeated use. Wooden spear production showcased Neanderthal expertise in organic tool manufacturing and understanding of material properties. The famous Schoningen spears, dating to approximately 400,000 years ago, revealed sophisticated woodworking techniques including careful species selection, seasoning processes, and precise shaping methods. These implements, crafted from spruce wood, measured up to 2.3 meters in length and featured carefully balanced proportions with thickened grip areas and tapered points. The manufacturing process required detailed knowledge of wood grain orientation, moisture content, and seasoning techniques to produce durable, functional weapons. The selection of wood species for different applications demonstrated Neanderthal understanding of material properties and functional requirements. Hardwoods such as oak and ash provided durability for handles and structural components, while softer woods like spruce and pine offered workability for detailed shaping and point formation. Archaeological evidence indicates that Neanderthals practiced controlled burning techniques to harden wooden points, creating fire-hardened tips that penetrated animal hides more effectively while maintaining structural integrity during impact. Bone tool production represented another dimension of Neanderthal technological sophistication, with implements ranging from simple, expedient tools to carefully manufactured specialized instruments. Retouchers made from long bone fragments enabled precise secondary modification of stone tools, while bone points served as projectile tips and piercing implements. The production process involved careful selection of appropriate bones, systematic breakage to obtain suitable blanks, and controlled abrasion against stone surfaces to achieve desired shapes and functional characteristics. Hide processing represented a critical technological domain that required specialized tools and techniques for converting animal skins into useful materials for clothing, shelter, and storage containers. Neanderthal scraper assemblages included numerous implements specifically designed for hide preparation, with distinctive edge angles and wear patterns indicating systematic processing activities. The scraping process involved removing flesh and fat deposits from fresh hides, followed by careful thinning and softening procedures that transformed raw skins into workable leather. The hafting of stone tools required sophisticated binding techniques and careful attention to component integration. Archaeological evidence suggests multiple hafting methods, including direct insertion into wooden handles, binding with processed sinew or plant fibers, and securing with natural adhesives such as birch bark tar. The production of birch bark tar, documented at several Neanderthal sites, required controlled heating of birch bark in oxygen-limited conditions to produce a sticky, waterproof adhesive suitable for tool hafting and equipment repair. Raw material procurement strategies revealed extensive territorial knowledge and sophisticated planning capabilities. Neanderthals regularly transported high-quality stone materials over distances exceeding 100 kilometers, indicating detailed understanding of lithic source locations and quality variations. Some assemblages contained exotic materials that originated from sources 200, 300 kilometers from the archaeological sites, suggesting either extensive mobility patterns or exchange networks between different population groups. The curation of stone tools represented an important aspect of Neanderthal technological behaviour, with evidence of systematic tool maintenance, resharpening and recycling. Many implements showed multiple episodes of retouch and modification, extending their useful lives through careful edge maintenance and functional redesign. This curation behaviour reflected both the investment required for tool production and the variable availability of suitable raw materials across different territories. Specialised hunting equipment included a diverse array of projectile points, thrusting spears, and cutting implements designed for different prey species and hunting situations. Points from Neanderthal sites exhibited various morphologies ranging from triangular forms suitable for penetration to leaf-shaped designs optimized for cutting and slashing. The diversity of point types suggests sophisticated understanding of weapon ballistics and prey anatomy, with different designs employed for hunting large mammals, medium-sized game, and smaller animals. The organization of tool production within Neanderthal settlements revealed structured approaches to technological activities and resource management. Archaeological evidence indicates designated napping areas within cave sites, often located near hearths to provide adequate lighting for detailed work. These production zones contained concentrations of debitage, tool blanks, and manufacturing debris that accumulated through repeated napping episodes. The spatial organization of these areas suggests systematic approaches to tool production and waste management within residential sites. Technological transmission between generations required sophisticated teaching methods and prolonged learning periods for mastering complex reduction techniques. The consistency of technological traditions across multiple sites and time periods indicates successful cultural transmission mechanisms that maintain technical knowledge within Neanderthal populations. Archaeological evidence suggests that novice knappers practiced on lower quality materials before attempting to work premium stone sources, indicating structured learning progressions and resource allocation strategies. The integration of multiple raw material types within single tool assemblages demonstrated Neanderthal ability to coordinate diverse procurement and processing activities. Sites typically contained stone tools, bone implements, wooden artifacts, and organic binding materials that were manufactured and maintained as integrated technological systems. This coordination required detailed planning, resource scheduling, and technical expertise across multiple material domains. Seasonal variations in tool production and use reflected adaptive responses to changing resource availability and activity patterns throughout the annual cycle. Some assemblages showed evidence of intensive hide processing during autumn months, while others indicated increased hunting equipment production preceding seasonal migrations of prey species. These temporal patterns suggest sophisticated understanding of seasonal resource cycles and proactive technological preparation for anticipated activities. The maintenance of technological traditions across vast geographic ranges demonstrated remarkable cultural stability within Neanderthal populations. Despite regional variations, core technological principles remained consistent from Western Europe to Central Asia, indicating shared cultural knowledge and maintained communication networks between distant populations. This technological coherence provided a unifying element that connected diverse Neanderthal communities across their extensive territorial range. The survival of Neanderthal populations across the harsh landscapes of Pleistocene Eurasia depended fundamentally upon their mastery of sophisticated hunting techniques and comprehensive resource exploitation strategies. Archaeological evidence reveals that these populations developed specialized approaches to procuring and processing large game animals that formed the cornerstone of their subsistence economy. The skeletal remains found at numerous Neanderthal sites demonstrate systematic targeting of megafauna including woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceros, straight-tusked elephants, cave bears, bison, aurochs, red deer and reindeer. These massive animals provided substantial caloric returns that justified the considerable risks and energy investments required for their successful procurement. Mammoth hunting represented perhaps the most challenging and rewarding aspect of Neanderthal subsistence activities. These colossal herbivores, weighing up to 6 tons and standing 4 meters tall at the shoulder, possessed formidable defensive capabilities, including massive curved tusks and thick protective hide. Archaeological sites such as Moldova in Ukraine and La Côte de Saint-Brelade in Jersey contain extensive mammoth bone accumulations that reveal systematic hunting and processing activities spanning thousands of years. The bone assemblages display distinctive butchery marks indicating precise knowledge of mammoth anatomy and efficient carcass processing techniques that maximised meat extraction while minimising energy expenditure. The procurement of woolly rhinoceros required equally sophisticated hunting strategies adapted to these aggressive, heavily armoured animals. Weighing up to 3 tons and equipped with formidable horns and thick skin, woolly rhinoceros presented significant challenges that demanded coordinated group efforts and specialised weapons. Sites such as Taubach in Germany and Salzgitter, Lebenstedt contain rhinoceros remains showing evidence of systematic hunting and processing, with cut marks indicating careful removal of meat, hide, and other useful materials. The concentration of rhinoceros bones at certain sites suggests either selective hunting of these animals or preferential processing locations where multiple carcasses were transported for systematic exploitation. Bison hunting formed a crucial component of Neanderthal subsistence strategies, particularly in the open grassland environments of Central and Eastern Europe. These powerful bovids, standing up to 2 meters tall and weighing over 800 kilograms, travelled in herds that provided opportunities for mass procurement events when successfully intercepted. Archaeological evidence from sites such as Moran in France reveals systematic bison hunting with bone accumulations representing hundreds of individuals processed over extended periods. The butchery patterns indicate efficient processing techniques that extracted maximum nutritional value from each carcass while producing useful byproducts including hides, bone tools, and marrow. Reindeer represented a particularly important prey species in northern European environments, where these animals form the primary protein source for many Neanderthal populations. The seasonal migration patterns of reindeer herds provided predictable opportunities for mass hunting events that could supply communities with substantial food reserves. Sites such as Salzgitter, Lebenstedt and Wallertheim in Germany contain extensive reindeer bone assemblages indicating systematic exploitation of migrating herds. The processing evidence reveals comprehensive utilization of reindeer carcasses, with every usable component extracted for food, tools, clothing, or shelter materials. The coordination required for successful large-game hunting necessitated sophisticated group organization and communication systems. Archaeological evidence suggests hunting parties consisting of 15 individuals working together to track, surround and kill large prey animals. The spatial distribution of stone tools and bone fragments at kill sites indicates coordinated activities with different group members performing specialized roles, including tracking, driving prey toward ambush locations, delivering killing blows, and systematic carcass processing. These complex operations required detailed planning, precise timing, and effective communication between participants. Seasonal hunting patterns reflected Neanderthal understanding of prey animal behavior and migration cycles. Archaeological assemblages from different time periods within the same sites reveal systematic variations in prey species composition that track seasonal availability. Spring assemblages typically contain higher frequencies of young animals and species that gave birth during warmer months, while autumn assemblages show increased representation of animals in peak condition before winter. These patterns indicate sophisticated scheduling of hunting activities to maximize nutritional returns and take advantage of predictable behavioral patterns in prey populations. The development of specialized hunting weapons required detailed understanding of animal anatomy and ballistics. Wooden spears with fire-hardened points provided the primary hunting implements, with different point morphologies designed for specific prey species and hunting situations. Thrusting spears with robust points served for close-quarters combat with large, dangerous animals, while lighter throwing spears enabled attacks from safer distances. Archaeological evidence suggests that Neanderthal hunters carried multiple spear types during hunting expeditions, selecting appropriate weapons based on encountered prey species and tactical situations. Ambush hunting strategies exploited natural landscape features to increase hunting success while minimizing risk to human participants. Cliff drives represented one of the most effective techniques, with hunters driving prey animals towards steep precipices where they fell to their deaths, or suffered injuries that facilitated killing. Sites such as La Côte de Saint-Prelade contain massive bone accumulations at the base of cliffs, indicating repeated use of these locations for driving mammoth and rhinoceros herds over the edge. The success of these operations required intimate knowledge of animal behaviour, terrain features, and weather conditions that influenced prey movement patterns. Water-based hunting strategies took advantage of river crossings and wetland environments where large animals became vulnerable to human predation. Archaeological sites located near ancient water sources contain evidence of systematic hunting activities targeting animals during drinking or crossing activities. The processing areas adjacent to these water sources reveal efficient butchery operations that took advantage of water availability for cleaning carcasses and processing hides. These locations often show evidence of repeated use over extended periods, indicating their importance as strategic hunting locations within Neanderthal territorial systems. Despite their specialization in large game hunting, Neanderthal populations demonstrated remarkable dietary flexibility through systematic exploitation of plant resources. Recent analysis of dental calculus from Neanderthal teeth has revolutionized understanding of their plant consumption patterns, revealing evidence of nuts, berries, tubers, and medicinal plants that supplemented their primarily carnivorous diet. The microscopic plant remains preserved in dental calculus include fragments of cooked starchy foods, indicating sophisticated plant processing techniques that increase nutritional availability and digestibility. Nut processing represented a particularly important aspect of plant food exploitation, with archaeological evidence revealing systematic collection and processing of hazelnuts, walnuts, and pine nuts. Sites such as Gorham's Cave in Gibraltar contain extensive shell fragments and processing tools, indicating intensive nut exploitation during autumn months when these resources reached peak availability. The processing techniques involved systematic cracking using stone anvils and hammers, followed by extraction of nutritious nut meats that provided essential fatty acids and calories during resource-scarce periods. Berry collection provided crucial vitamins and carbohydrates that balanced the protein-heavy diet derived from large game hunting. Dental calculus analysis has identified remains of various berry species including blackberries, elderberries, and rose hips that were systematically collected during summer and autumn months. The processing of these fruits likely involved both immediate consumption and preservation techniques, such as drying or mixing with animal fats, to create concentrated food stores for winter consumption. Tuber exploitation required sophisticated knowledge of plant identification and seasonal availability patterns. Archaeological evidence suggests that Neanderthals systematically collected various root vegetables, including wild carrots, onions, and other starchy tubers that provided essential carbohydrates. The processing of these plant foods involved careful preparation techniques, including cooking, grinding, and fermentation, that increased nutritional availability while reducing toxic compounds present in some wild plant species. The use of medicinal plants represents one of the most intriguing aspects of Neanderthal plant exploitation, suggesting sophisticated understanding of plant properties and therapeutic applications. Dental calculus from Neanderthal remains at sites such as El Sidron in Spain, contains evidence of plants with known medicinal properties including yarrow and chamomile. These plants have bitter tastes and limited nutritional value, suggesting their consumption was motivated by therapeutic rather than dietary considerations. The systematic use of medicinal plants indicates detailed botanical knowledge and possibly rudimentary healthcare practices within Neanderthal communities. Cooking methods and food processing techniques demonstrated sophisticated understanding of thermal treatment effects on food, safety, digestibility, and nutritional availability. Archaeological evidence from numerous Neanderthal sites reveals systematic use of controlled fire for food preparation, with hearth features showing evidence of repeated use for cooking activities. The arrangement of stones around hearths indicates construction of cooking facilities designed to control heat distribution and maintain optimal temperatures for different food processing activities. Roasting represented the primary cooking method for large game meat, with archaeological evidence indicating systematic use of hearths for processing mammoth, rhinoceros, and bison carcasses. The bone modifications found at these sites include distinctive burning patterns that result from controlled roasting rather than accidental exposure to fire. These patterns indicate careful temperature control and systematic rotation of the meat portions to ensure even cooking throughout large muscle masses. The roasting process not only improved food safety by eliminating pathogens, but also enhanced digestibility and flavour while preserving meat for extended periods. Boiling techniques utilising natural containers such as animal stomachs or hide-lined pits enabled processing of plant foods and extraction of nutrients from bones and other materials. Archaeological evidence suggests that Neanderthals employed stone boiling methods, heating stones in fires and transferring them to water-filled containers to achieve boiling temperatures. This technique enabled processing of tough plant materials, extraction of bone marrow and grease, and preparation of nutritious broths that maximized caloric extraction from available resources. Smoking and drying represented crucial preservation techniques that enabled storage of surplus food resources for consumption during scarce periods. Archaeological sites contain evidence of specialized drying racks and smoking facilities constructed from wood and stone materials. The preservation process involved careful control of temperature and humidity to remove moisture while preventing spoilage, creating dried meat and fish products that could be stored for months without refrigeration. These preservation techniques enabled Neanderthal populations to accumulate food reserves that provided security during harsh winter months or resource shortages. Bone marrow extraction represented a critical component of Neanderthal food processing activities, providing essential fatty acids and calories that complemented lean muscle meat. Archaeological assemblages contain numerous long bones with distinctive fracture patterns indicating systematic marrow extraction using stone hammers and anvils. The processing techniques involved careful selection of bones with maximum marrow content, followed by precise fracturing that accessed internal cavities while minimizing bone fragment contamination of the extracted marrow. Fat rendering from large game carcasses provided essential calories and materials for food preservation and tool maintenance. Archaeological evidence indicates systematic processing of adipose tissue from mammoth, rhinoceros, and other large animals to extract rendered fat for various applications. The rendering process involved controlled heating of fat deposits to separate liquid fat from tissue components, producing materials used for food preservation, waterproofing, and tool maintenance activities. The integration of diverse food processing techniques created comprehensive subsistence systems that maximize nutritional extraction from available resources while minimizing waste. Archaeological assemblages reveal systematic processing of animal carcasses that utilize virtually every usable component, from muscle meat and organs to bones, hide, and even blood. This comprehensive approach reflected both the high energy investment required to procure large game animals and the variable availability of resources in challenging Pleistocene environments. Seasonal food storage strategies enabled Neanderthal populations to maintain nutrition during periods of resource scarcity. Archaeological evidence suggests various storage techniques, including underground caches, elevated platforms, and natural refrigeration in cave environments. The storage facilities show evidence of systematic organization and protection from scavengers, indicating sophisticated planning for seasonal resource management. These storage systems enabled accumulation of surplus resources during peak availability periods for consumption, during harsh winter months when hunting opportunities were limited. The archaeological evidence from Neanderthal settlements across Europe and Western Asia reveals consistent patterns of small group organisation that form the fundamental building blocks of their society. Site occupation data from caves and rock shelters throughout their territorial range indicates residential groups typically numbering between 10 and 30 individuals, with most sites showing evidence of sustained habitation by groups clustering around 15-20 people. These population estimates derive from spatial analysis of living floors, hearth distributions, and artifact densities that reflect the daily activities and sleeping arrangements of prehistoric communities. The cave site of Grotte du Renne in France exemplifies typical Neanderthal group size patterns, with excavations revealing distinct activity areas that correspond to family units of 4, 6 individuals clustered around individual hearths. The spatial organisation of stone tools, food processing debris, and sleeping areas suggest nuclear family structures nested within larger residential groups. Similar patterns emerge from sites across the Neanderthal range, where the archaeological evidence consistently points towards small, cohesive social units that maintained stable membership over extended periods. The demographic composition of these groups likely included multiple generations, with evidence suggesting extended family structures that incorporated grandparents, parents, and children within single residential units. Age-at-death profiles reconstructed from Neanderthal skeletal remains indicate significant numbers of individuals surviving beyond reproductive age, suggesting that elderly group members played important roles in community survival through their accumulated knowledge and experience. The presence of these older individuals within archaeological contexts demonstrates that Neanderthal groups invested resources in caring for non-productive members, indicating complex social bonds that extended beyond immediate survival needs. Skeletal evidence from numerous Neanderthal sites provides compelling documentation of systematic care for disabled and injured community members, revealing sophisticated social support systems that maintained group cohesion through cooperative assistance. The famous Shanidar 1 individual from Iraq survived for years with a withered right arm, blindness in one eye, and extensive cranial injuries that would have prevented independent survival in harsh Pleistocene environments. The healing patterns visible on his bones indicate prolonged care and protection by other group members, who provided food, shelter, and protection for an individual incapable of contributing to hunting or resource procurement activities. The La Chapelle aux Saint Neanderthal from France presents another striking example of community care for disabled individuals. This elderly male suffered from severe arthritis in his spine and limbs, dental abscesses, and other debilitating conditions that would have severely limited his mobility and ability to participate in normal subsistence activities. Despite these limitations, he survived to an advanced age for Neanderthal populations, indicating sustained support from community members who shared resources and provided protection for a non-productive individual. The investment of group resources in maintaining disabled members suggests emotional bonds and social obligations that transcended immediate survival calculations. Evidence from the Atapuerca sites in Spain reveals additional cases of community care, including individuals with developmental abnormalities and traumatic injuries that healed over extended periods. The survival of these individuals required coordinated group efforts to provide food, shelter, and protection during vulnerable recovery periods. The frequency of healed injuries in Neanderthal skeletal assemblages indicates that such care was not exceptional but rather represented standard social behaviour that strengthened group bonds and maintained community cohesion through mutual support systems. The territorial behaviour of Neanderthal groups emerges through analysis of raw material transport patterns and site distribution across the European landscape. Lithic sourcing studies reveal that individual groups maintain territories encompassing diverse ecological zones, within ranges typically extending 50, 100 kilometers from residential bases. The systematic transport of high-quality stone materials from specific quarry locations to processing sites demonstrates detailed knowledge of resource distributions and established patterns of territorial exploitation that minimize conflicts between neighboring groups. Archaeological evidence from the Périgord region of France illustrates typical territorial organization, with distinct clusters of sites separated by buffer zones containing minimal archaeological evidence. Each cluster contains a hierarchy of site types including large residential caves, smaller temporary camps, and specialized activity locations such as hunting blinds and raw material procurement sites. The spatial arrangement of these site clusters suggests territorial boundaries that provided each group with access to varied resources while maintaining separation from neighboring populations. The distribution of distinctive stone tool styles across geographic regions provides additional evidence for territorial boundaries and cultural group identity. The Kinamasterian tradition, concentrated in southwestern France, shows clear geographic boundaries that correspond to major river valleys and mountain ranges. These technological boundaries likely reflect territorial limits maintained by different Neanderthal groups, with distinct cultural traditions serving as markers of group identity and territorial claims. The consistency of these patterns across multiple time periods suggests stable territorial systems that persisted for thousands of years. Resource-sharing patterns within Neanderthal territories reveal sophisticated systems of reciprocal exchange that distributed risk and ensured group survival during periods of local resource scarcity. Archaeological evidence indicates systematic sharing of large game carcasses between multiple family units, with butchery patterns showing division of meat portions according to established social protocols. The transport of processed meat and tools between different sites within territorial ranges demonstrates coordinated resource management that maximize the utility of successful hunting episodes. The seasonal aggregation of multiple groups at favored locations created opportunities for resource sharing on a larger scale, with archaeological evidence suggesting periodic gatherings that brought together several residential groups for cooperative activities. Sites such as Moran in France contain evidence of massive bison processing events that exceeded the consumption capacity of single groups, indicating coordinated hunting efforts involving multiple communities. These aggregation events likely served multiple functions, including mate exchange, information sharing, and cooperative resource procurement that strengthened social networks across broader regional populations. Leadership structures within Neanderthal groups remain difficult to reconstruct directly from archaeological evidence, but settlement patterns and resource distribution provide insights into decision-making processes and social organization. The spatial arrangement of activities around individual hearths suggests family-based decision-making units, while the coordination required for successful large game hunting indicates temporary leadership roles based on expertise and experience. The absence of elaborate material culture or status markers suggests relatively egalitarian social organization without permanent hierarchical structures. The organization of hunting expeditions required coordination and planning that implies leadership roles, though these were likely situational rather than permanent positions. Archaeological evidence from kill sites shows systematic division of labor during carcass processing, with different individuals performing specialized tasks including butchery, tool maintenance, and material transport. The efficiency of these operations suggests established protocols and leadership structures that coordinated group activities without formal authority positions. Settlement pattern analysis reveals decision-making processes related to site selection and resource management that required group consensus and planning. The repeated occupation of specific cave sites over thousands of years indicates collective decisions about territorial use and resource allocation. The investment in site modification activities such as hearth construction and living floor preparation suggests group decisions about long-term occupation strategies and resource allocation priorities. The evidence for symbolic behavior and ritual activities provides insights into social organization and group identity formation among Neanderthal populations. Burial practices documented at sites throughout Europe and Western Asia demonstrate complex social relationships and possibly spiritual beliefs that strengthened group cohesion. The careful placement of bodies in prepared graves, often accompanied by stone tools and other artifacts, suggests ceremonial treatment of the deceased that reflected their social importance and maintained connections between living and dead community members. The Shanidar cave burials in Iraq provide particularly compelling evidence for ritual behavior and social organization. The arrangement of bodies in specific orientations and the possible association with flower pollen suggests ceremonial treatment that reflected complex beliefs about death and social relationships. The investment of time and energy in proper burial procedures indicates social obligations and emotional bonds that extended beyond immediate survival concerns. Pigment use documented at numerous Neanderthal sites suggests symbolic activities that may have served social functions, including group identification and ceremonial practices. Archaeological evidence reveals systematic collection and processing of ochre and manganese minerals that were ground into powders and applied to various materials. The transport of these pigments over considerable distances indicates their importance in social activities and group identity maintenance. The production and use of personal ornaments represents another dimension of Neanderthal social behavior that suggests individual identity and status differentiation within groups. Archaeological evidence from sites such as Grotte du Renne includes perforated shells and carved bone objects that may have served as jewellery or status markers. These artefacts indicate investment in non-utilitarian activities that reflected social relationships and individual identity within group contexts. Conflict resolution mechanisms within Neanderthal groups remain largely invisible in the archaeological record, though the evidence for sustained group cohesion suggests effective systems for managing internal disputes and maintaining social stability. The low frequency of trauma patterns consistent with interpersonal violence indicates relatively peaceful social relationships within groups, though competition between different groups may have been more common. The evidence for care of injured individuals suggests that conflicts were resolved through social mechanisms rather than exclusion or abandonment of group members. The maintenance of cultural traditions across multiple generations required sophisticated systems of knowledge, transmission, and social learning that strengthened group identity and survival capabilities. The consistency of stone tool manufacturing techniques across thousands of years indicates effective teaching methods that preserve technical knowledge within communities. The complexity of these traditions suggests structured learning processes that involved skilled practitioners teaching novices through extended apprenticeships and practice sessions. Seasonal mobility patterns required coordinated decision-making and planning that involved entire residential groups in complex logistical operations. Archaeological evidence indicates systematic abandonment and reoccupation of sites according to seasonal resource availability and climatic conditions. The coordination required for these movements suggests established leadership roles and decision-making processes that balanced individual family needs with broader group survival strategies. The integration of multiple family units within larger residential groups created complex social dynamics that required mechanisms for maintaining cooperation and resolving conflicts. Archaeological evidence suggests that these groups maintained stability through kinship relationships, resource-sharing obligations, and mutual defense agreements that created interdependent social networks. The spatial organisation of activities within cave sites reflects these social relationships through the clustering of related families around shared activity areas and resource processing locations. The archaeological record reveals compelling evidence that Neanderthal populations engaged in complex symbolic behaviours that required sophisticated cognitive abilities far exceeding basic survival needs. These activities, documented across numerous sites throughout Europe and Western Asia, demonstrate abstract thinking, planning capabilities, and social awareness that fundamentally challenge earlier assumptions about Neanderthal intellectual capacity. The systematic nature of these behaviours, their geographic distribution, and their persistence across thousands of years indicate that symbolic expression formed an integral component of Neanderthal culture, rather than representing isolated instances of advanced behaviour. The burial practices documented at La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France provide some of the most convincing evidence for intentional interment of the deceased by Neanderthal populations. The skeletal remains of an elderly male, discovered in 1908, were found in a shallow depression that had been deliberately excavated within the cave floor. The body had been positioned in a flexed posture with the knees drawn toward the chest, an arrangement that required careful placement and could not have resulted from natural depositional processes. The surrounding sediments showed clear evidence of intentional backfilling, with loose soil and small stones packed around the remains to create a protective covering. The stratigraphic context of the La Chapelle burial revealed additional details that support intentional interment. The grave cut extended approximately 30 centimetres below the contemporary living surface, requiring deliberate excavation using stone tools or wooden implements. The edges of the depression showed clear boundaries that distinguished the burial feature from surrounding undisturbed sediments. Stone tools and animal bone fragments found within the grave fill suggested that these artefacts had been intentionally placed with the deceased, though their precise symbolic meaning remained subject to interpretation. The preservation conditions at La Chapelle-aux-Saints enabled detailed analysis of the burial context, revealing evidence for rapid covering of the remains that protected them from scavenging and natural disturbance. The articulated condition of the skeleton indicated that decomposition had occurred within the grave, rather than through exposure on the surface followed by secondary burial. Taphonomic analysis confirmed that the bones showed minimal evidence of carnivore gnawing or weathering, supporting the interpretation of immediate burial following death. The Shanada cave site in Iraq has yielded even more extensive evidence for Neanderthal burial practices, with multiple individuals interred within the cave deposits over thousands of years. Shanada 4, discovered in association with concentrations of flower pollen, initially suggested the possibility of ritual flower placement during burial ceremonies, while subsequent analysis has questioned whether the pollen association resulted from intentional human behaviour or natural processes. The overall burial context remains compelling evidence for deliberate interment practices. The positioning of Shanida burials revealed consistent patterns that suggest established cultural protocols for treatment of the deceased. Multiple individuals were placed in flexed positions with specific orientations relative to cave walls and geological features. The clustering of burials in particular areas of the cave indicated designated burial zones that were maintained over extended periods, suggesting cultural continuity in mortuary practices across multiple generations. The Shanada 1 individual, despite his severe disabilities and advanced age, received burial treatment identical to other community members, indicating that mortuary practices extended to all group members regardless of their physical condition or social productivity. The careful placement of his remains and the protective covering of sediments demonstrated that disabled individuals maintained full social status within Neanderthal communities even after death. Additional burial sites throughout Europe and Western Asia have confirmed the widespread nature of Neanderthal mortuary practices. The Dederia cave site in Syria yielded the remains of 2 Neanderthal children who had been deliberately buried in close proximity to each other. The careful positioning of these young individuals and the association with stone tools suggested that burial practices extended to all age groups within Neanderthal society. The investment of time and energy in proper burial of children who had not yet contributed significantly to group survival indicates emotional bonds and social obligations that transcended practical considerations. The systematic use of mineral pigments represents another crucial dimension of Neanderthal symbolic behaviour, with archaeological evidence documenting the collection, processing and application of colorants across numerous sites throughout their territorial range. Ochre, a naturally occurring iron oxide that produces red and yellow pigments, appears consistently in Neanderthal archaeological assemblages from Spain to Central Asia. The ubiquity of ochre finds and the evidence for systematic processing indicate that pigment use represented a standardized cultural practice rather than isolated experimentation. The procurement of ochre required deliberate effort and planning, as high-quality deposits were not universally available across Neanderthal territories. Archaeological evidence indicates transport of ochre materials over distances exceeding 25 kilometers from known geological sources, demonstrating that Neanderthal groups specifically sought out these materials for cultural purposes. The selection criteria for ochre procurement showed preferences for specific colour qualities and textures that produced optimal pigments for intended applications. Processing techniques for ochre preparation involved grinding and abrading raw materials against stone surfaces to produce fine powders suitable for application. Archaeological sites contain numerous grinding stones with distinctive red staining that resulted from repeated ochre processing activities. The wear patterns on these implements indicate systematic production methods that created consistent pigment qualities across multiple processing episodes. Manganese dioxide, which produces black pigments, appears less frequently in Neanderthal sites, but shows similar patterns of deliberate procurement and processing. The combination of red ochre and black manganese provided a basic palette that enabled creation of varied colour effects for different symbolic purposes. The transport distances for manganese materials often exceeded those for ochre, indicating even greater investment in obtaining specific colorant materials. The application of processed pigments remains more difficult to document directly due to preservation limitations, but several lines of evidence suggest systematic use for body decoration and symbolic marking. Microscopic analysis of ochre residues from some sites reveals wear patterns consistent with application to soft materials such as skin or hide. The particle size distributions of processed ochre suggest preparation methods optimized for body painting rather than other potential applications such as hide processing or tool maintenance. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that ochre preparation techniques documented at Neanderthal sites produce pigments suitable for body decoration that remain visible for extended periods when properly applied. The colour intensity and adherence properties of these pigments would have enabled creation of distinctive markings for individual identification, group membership, or ceremonial purposes. The persistence of ochre staining on archaeological materials suggests that pigment applications were sufficiently durable to serve practical, symbolic functions. The discovery of perforated shells at several Neanderthal sites provides additional evidence for symbolic behaviour and possible ornament production. The Grotte du Rennes site in France yielded numerous marine shells with carefully drilled holes that could have served as beads or pendants. The perforation techniques showed consistent methods and hole placement that indicate intentional modification for suspension or attachment purposes rather than natural processes or accidental damage. The selection of shells for perforation showed preferences for specific species and size ranges that produced optimal ornament materials. Archaeological analysis revealed that Neanderthals chose shells with attractive colours and shapes while avoiding damaged or inferior specimens. The transport of marine shells to inland sites located hundreds of kilometres from coastal sources demonstrates significant investment in obtaining materials for ornament production. The drilling techniques used to create perforations in shells required considerable skill and patience, with archaeological evidence indicating use of pointed stone tools rotated against shell surfaces to gradually penetrate the calcium carbonate material. The consistent hole placement and smooth edges suggest practiced techniques that produced functional and aesthetically pleasing results. The time investment required for shell perforation indicates that ornament production represented a valued cultural activity worth the substantial effort required. Evidence for the cognitive abilities underlying these symbolic behaviours emerges through analysis of the planning and execution requirements for successful completion of complex tasks. The production of ochre pigments required multi-step processes including source identification, material procurement, transport to processing locations, grinding and preparation, and application to intended targets. Each stage demanded specific knowledge and skills that had to be coordinated within temporal frameworks that extended beyond immediate needs. The linguistic capabilities of Neanderthal populations remain subject to ongoing debate, but anatomical evidence provides insights into their potential for complex vocal communication. The hyoid bone, which anchors muscles involved in speech production, has been recovered from Neanderthal remains at Kabara Cave and shows morphology virtually identical to modern humans. The positioning and muscle attachment sites on Neanderthal hyoid bones indicate vocal tract anatomy, capable of producing the full range of sounds required for articulate speech. Cranial base anatomy in Neanderthal skulls reveals flexion patterns that created vocal tract proportions suitable for complex sound production. The degree of basic cranial flexion affects the positioning of the larynx and pharynx, which determine the acoustic properties of the vocal tract. Neanderthal cranial base morphology falls within the range of variation seen in modern human populations, suggesting comparable vocal capabilities. The neural organization of Neanderthal brains, while differing in some respects from modern humans, included enlarged regions associated with complex cognitive processing. The expanded parietal lobes evident in Neanderthal cranial morphology housed neural networks responsible for spatial reasoning, tool manipulation, and integration of sensory information. These cognitive capabilities provided the foundation for the complex behaviours documented in the archaeological record. The frontal lobe development in Neanderthal brains supported executive functions, including planning, decision-making, and behavioural control that enabled coordination of complex activities. The evidence for multi-step tool production sequences, coordinated hunting strategies, and symbolic behaviours all required frontal lobe functions that operated at sophisticated levels. The neural capacity for these cognitive operations provided the biological foundation for the cultural achievements documented at Neanderthal sites. The temporal lobe regions associated with memory formation and language processing showed development patterns in Neanderthal brains that supported complex information storage and retrieval. The maintenance of cultural traditions across multiple generations required neural systems capable of encoding, storing, and transmitting detailed technical knowledge. The consistency of technological traditions across Neanderthal populations demonstrates effective information processing and communication systems. The integration of symbolic behaviours within broader cultural systems reveals sophisticated cognitive abilities that coordinated multiple domains of knowledge and activity. The combination of burial practices, pigment use, ornament production, and complex tool technologies required neural systems capable of managing diverse information streams and coordinating varied behavioural outputs. These integrated cultural systems demonstrate cognitive flexibility and abstract reasoning abilities that approach those of contemporary modern human populations. The aesthetic sensibilities evident in Neanderthal material culture suggest cognitive abilities that extended beyond purely functional considerations to include appreciation for visual qualities and symbolic meanings. The selection of unusual stones, shells, and other objects for transport and curation indicates recognition of aesthetic properties that distinguished these items from purely utilitarian materials. The investment in non-functional activities such as pigment preparation and ornament production demonstrates cognitive priorities that valued symbolic expression alongside survival needs. The survival of Neanderthal populations across more than 300,000 years of European and Western Asian occupation required extraordinary adaptive capabilities to withstand the dramatic environmental fluctuations that characterized the Middle and Late Pleistocene epochs. These populations endured at least 20 major glacial-interglacial cycles, each bringing radical transformations to the landscapes they inhabited. During glacial maxima, massive ice sheets advanced southward from Scandinavia, covering much of northern Europe in ice kilometres thick, while permafrost extended hundreds of kilometres beyond the glacier margins. Temperatures plummeted to levels 10, 15 degrees Celsius below modern averages, creating tundra steppe environments where only the hardiest plants and animals could survive. The last glacial maximum, occurring approximately 26,500 years ago, exemplified the extreme conditions that Neanderthal populations had weathered repeatedly throughout their evolutionary history. Ice sheets extended across Britain, Scandinavia, and much of northern Germany, creating a landscape dominated by periglacial processes including freeze-thaw cycles, solifluction, and widespread permafrost development. The tree line retreated southward by 1,000 kilometres or more, eliminating the temperate forests that had provided crucial resources during warmer periods. Annual temperatures in Central Europe averaged -5 to -10 degrees Celsius, with winter temperatures dropping below -30 degrees Celsius for extended periods. These glacial environments demanded sophisticated behavioural adaptations that enabled Neanderthal groups to maintain viable populations despite resource scarcity and extreme cold stress. Archaeological evidence from sites such as Molodova in Ukraine reveals specialised winter habitation structures constructed from mammoth bones and hides that provided insulated shelters capable of retaining heat generated by central hearths. The bone frameworks of these structures incorporated interlocking mammoth skulls, long bones and tusks, arranged to create dome-shaped dwellings measuring 4-6 metres in diameter. Hide coverings secured over these frameworks created windproof barriers that trapped warm air while allowing smoke ventilation through carefully positioned openings. The construction of these shelters required coordinated group efforts to transport and position mammoth bones weighing hundreds of kilograms each. Archaeological analysis reveals systematic selection of specific bone elements based on their structural properties and dimensions, with skulls serving as foundation elements, while long bones provided vertical supports and curved tusks created the dome framework. The engineering principles underlying these constructions demonstrate sophisticated understanding of structural mechanics and thermal dynamics that enabled creation of effective cold weather housing using available materials. During interglacial periods, rising temperatures triggered rapid environmental transformations that presented different but equally challenging adaptive requirements. The retreat of ice sheets and expansion of deciduous forests created opportunities for population growth and territorial expansion, but also introduced new competitive pressures from expanding plant and animal communities. Archaeological evidence indicates that Neanderthal populations responded to these changes through rapid territorial expansion northward, recolonizing previously glaciated regions as soon as environmental conditions permitted sustainable habitation. The Eemian interglacial, lasting from approximately 130,000 to 115,000 years ago, created environmental conditions significantly warmer than present-day Europe, with temperatures averaging 2-3 degrees Celsius above modern levels. Dense temperate forests dominated the landscape from southern Spain to Scandinavia, supporting diverse animal communities that included straight-tusked elephants, forest rhinoceros, hippopotamus, and numerous deer species. These warm, forested environments required different subsistence strategies and technological adaptations compared to the open tundra steppe conditions that characterize glacial periods. Neanderthal populations demonstrated remarkable flexibility in adapting their hunting strategies to exploit the diverse prey species available during interglacial periods. Forest environments supported smaller, more solitary prey animals that required different procurement techniques compared to the herd animals of glacial steppes. Archaeological assemblages from interglacial sites show increased frequencies of deer, wild boar, and other forest-adapted species, along with technological modifications including lighter projectile points and specialized processing tools adapted for woodland hunting conditions. The transition periods between glacial and interglacial phases created particularly challenging conditions, as rapidly changing environments disrupted established resource bases and territorial boundaries. Archaeological evidence suggests that these transitional periods triggered population movements and cultural changes as groups adapted to shifting resource availability and environmental conditions. Site abandonment patterns indicate systematic responses to environmental deterioration, with populations retreating to refugial areas during adverse conditions and expanding during favourable periods. The Younger Dryas stadial, occurring approximately 12,900 to 11,700 years ago, represented one of the most dramatic short-term climate reversals documented in the geological record. This rapid cooling event, triggered by disruption of North Atlantic circulation patterns, returned much of Europe to near-glacial conditions within decades. While this event occurred after Neanderthal extinction, similar rapid climate shifts throughout the Pleistocene would have created comparable challenges that tested the adaptive capabilities of Neanderthal populations. Volcanic catastrophes represented another category of environmental challenge that Neanderthal populations encountered throughout their evolutionary history. The Campanian Ignimbritis eruption, occurring approximately 39,280 years ago, ranks among the largest volcanic events of the past 200,000 years and coincided closely with the final phases of Neanderthal occupation in Europe. This massive eruption, originating from the Campi Flegrei caldera near Naples, ejected an estimated 300 cubic kilometres of volcanic material into the atmosphere, creating widespread environmental disruption across southeastern Europe and the eastern Mediterranean region. The immediate effects of the Campanian Ignimbrite eruption included deposition of volcanic ash layers up to several metres thick across the Balkans, with significant ashfall extending into Central Europe and Western Asia. Archaeological sites in Romania, Bulgaria and Greece contain distinct tephra layers that mark this eruption event, providing precise chronological markers for late Neanderthal occupation. The ash deposits show evidence of rapid accumulation that would have buried vegetation, contaminated water sources, and created respiratory hazards for human and animal populations. The climatic effects of the Campanian Ignimbrite eruption extended far beyond the immediate ashfall zone through injection of sulfur compounds into the stratosphere. These aerosols created a global cooling effect that lasted several years, reducing temperatures by an estimated 4 degrees Celsius across Europe during a period when Neanderthal populations were already under stress from advancing glacial conditions. The combination of direct environmental damage and prolonged cooling created a cascade of ecological disruptions that eliminated many plant and animal species from affected regions. Archaeological evidence suggests that Neanderthal populations in southeastern Europe experienced severe population declines following the Campanian Ignimbrite eruption. Sites in the Balkans show evidence of abandonment around this time period, with subsequent occupations representing different cultural traditions associated with modern human populations. The correlation between volcanic ash deposition and site abandonment patterns suggests that the eruption created environmental conditions that exceeded the adaptive capabilities of local Neanderthal populations. The broader implications of volcanic catastrophes for Neanderthal survival extended beyond immediate environmental damage to include disruption of resource networks and territorial systems. Volcanic events eliminated local prey populations, destroyed plant food sources, and contaminated water supplies across extensive regions. The recovery of these ecological systems required decades or centuries, creating prolonged periods of resource scarcity that challenged the survival capabilities of human populations dependent on local resources. Adaptation to diverse ecosystems across the Neanderthal range required sophisticated understanding of ecological relationships and resource management strategies. Populations inhabiting Mediterranean environments developed subsistence strategies that exploited seasonal abundance patterns in plant and animal resources, with archaeological evidence indicating systematic collection of nuts, berries, and other plant foods during autumn months. Coastal populations incorporated marine resources including shellfish, fish, and marine mammals into their dietary repertoires, requiring specialized technologies and knowledge systems for effective exploitation. The tundra steppe environments of glacial period supported different ecological communities dominated by large herbivores, including mammoth, woolly rhinoceros, reindeer, and bison. These ecosystems provided high biomass concentrations of large prey animals, but required specialized hunting technologies and group coordination for successful procurement. Archaeological evidence indicates that Neanderthal populations developed sophisticated strategies for exploiting these resources, including seasonal migration following prey herds and establishment of specialized hunting camps at strategic locations. Temperate forest environments during interglacial periods created fragmented landscapes with diverse microhabitats that supported varied plant and animal communities. These ecosystems required different resource management strategies compared to the more homogeneous tundra steppe environments, with populations needing to exploit scattered resource patches across forested territories. Archaeological assemblages from forest environments show greater diversity in tool types and prey species, reflecting adaptation to more complex ecological conditions. Montane environments presented unique challenges related to altitude, seasonal snow cover, and limited growing seasons that affected both plant and animal productivity. Neanderthal populations occupying mountain valleys and high-altitude caves developed specialized adaptations for extreme cold and limited resource availability. Archaeological sites in the Pyrenees, Alps, and Caucasus Mountains reveal evidence of seasonal occupation patterns that tracked resource availability and weather conditions throughout annual cycles. Resource management during periods of climate instability required sophisticated planning and storage strategies that enabled populations to survive through extended periods of environmental stress. Archaeological evidence indicates systematic food storage activities, including caching of processed meat, nuts, and other non-perishable resources in natural refrigeration sites such as cave environments and permafrost zones. These storage systems required detailed knowledge of preservation techniques and careful selection of storage locations that remained accessible during harsh weather conditions. The development of clothing technologies represented a crucial adaptation for survival in cold environments, though direct archaeological evidence remains limited due to preservation constraints. Indirect evidence from stone tool assemblages includes specialized scrapers and cutting implements designed for hide processing, suggesting systematic production of leather goods and fur clothing. The abundance of these tools in northern European sites indicates that clothing production formed a major component of Neanderthal technological systems in cold environments. Fuel management strategies enabled Neanderthal populations to maintain fires during periods when wood resources were scarce or unavailable. Archaeological evidence indicates the use of alternative fuel sources including bone, animal fat, and dried vegetation during harsh environmental conditions. The systematic collection and preparation of these materials required planning and storage capabilities that ensured fire maintenance during critical survival periods. Shelter construction techniques adapted to different environmental conditions and available materials across the Neanderthal range. Cave sites provided natural protection that was enhanced through construction of wind barriers, sleeping platforms, and storage facilities. Open-air sites required construction of artificial shelters using available materials including stone, bone, wood, and hide components. The engineering principles underlying these constructions demonstrate sophisticated understanding of structural requirements for different environmental conditions. Water procurement and management became critical during periods of environmental stress, when surface water sources froze or became contaminated. Archaeological evidence suggests that Neanderthal populations developed techniques for melting snow and ice, accessing groundwater sources, and storing water in containers made from animal stomachs or hide. These water management strategies required detailed knowledge of local hydrology and seasonal availability patterns. The social dimensions of environmental adaptation required coordinated group responses to changing conditions that exceeded individual capabilities. Archaeological evidence indicates that environmental stress periods triggered changes in group size, territorial use patterns, and resource-sharing behaviours that enhanced collective survival capabilities. These social adaptations complemented technological and behavioural responses to create integrated survival strategies that enabled persistence through extreme environmental challenges. Population movements in response to environmental changes created complex patterns of territorial abandonment and reoccupation that tracked climatic fluctuations across multiple temporal scales. Archaeological site distributions reveal systematic responses to environmental deterioration, with populations concentrating in refugial areas during adverse conditions and expanding during favourable periods. These movement patterns required detailed environmental knowledge and coordinated decision-making that balanced immediate survival needs with long-term territorial strategies. The cumulative effects of repeated environmental challenges throughout Neanderthal evolutionary history created selective pressures that shaped their physical and behavioural adaptations. Populations that survived multiple glacial cycles developed enhanced capabilities for cold tolerance, resource management, and environmental prediction that enabled persistence through extreme conditions. These adaptive capabilities represented the culmination of hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary refinement in response to challenging and variable environmental conditions. The convergence of Neanderthal and modern human populations in the Levantine corridor, approximately 100,000 years ago, mark the beginning of one of the most significant encounters in human evolutionary history. These initial contact zones created complex demographic dynamics as two distinct hominin lineages encountered each other across landscapes that could support only limited population densities. The Taban Cave sequence provides crucial stratigraphic evidence for alternating occupations by Neanderthal and modern human populations over a span of approximately 50,000 years. Layer C contains classic Neanderthal remains associated with Mousterian tool assemblages, while overlying deposits yield modern human fossils accompanied by different technological traditions. The repeated occupation of the same cave system by different hominin populations suggests territorial competition and displacement events that characterized early interaction periods in the Levant. Kebra Cave presents additional evidence for this complex occupation history, with Neanderthal remains dating to approximately 60,000 years ago found in deposits that also contain technological elements more commonly associated with modern human populations. The mixing of cultural traditions within single archaeological contexts indicates either direct contact between populations or rapid territorial succession that left mixed assemblages in repeatedly occupied sites. The preservation conditions at Kebara enabled detailed analysis of both skeletal remains and cultural materials that document the transition between different occupational phases. The expansion of modern human populations into Europe beginning around 45,000 years ago created the most extensive and prolonged period of coexistence between the two species. Archaeological sites across the continent document a complex mosaic of occupation patterns, as modern humans advanced westward from the Danube corridor, while Neanderthal populations maintained territories in Western and Southern European refugia. The Aurignacian technological tradition associated with early modern Europeans appears first in southeastern Europe before spreading rapidly across the continent, often overlying Mousterian deposits in cave sequences. The Châtelperronian industry, documented at sites such as Grotte du Renne in France, represents one of the most intriguing aspects of Neanderthal-modern human interaction. This technological tradition combines elements of traditional Mousterian tool production with innovations including blade technology and bone tool manufacturing that were previously associated exclusively with modern human populations. The appearance of these hybrid technologies in contexts containing Neanderthal remains suggests either independent innovation by Neanderthal populations or cultural transmission through contact with modern human groups. Radiocarbon dating of Châtelperronian sites indicates contemporaneity with early Aurignacian occupations in the same geographic regions, confirming that Neanderthal and modern human populations coexisted in France for several thousand years. The technological similarities between late Châtelperronian and early Aurignacian assemblages suggest cultural exchange that influenced tool production methods in both populations. However, the direction and mechanism of this technological transfer remains subjects of ongoing archaeological debate. The demographic implications of population contact become evident through analysis of site distribution patterns and occupation intensities during the transition period. Modern human sites show evidence of larger group sizes and more intensive occupation compared to contemporary Neanderthal settlements, suggesting demographic advantages that may have influenced competitive outcomes. Archaeological assemblages from Aurignacian sites contain greater artifact densities and more diverse tool types compared to Mousterian assemblages, indicating either larger populations or different organisational strategies that increased material culture production. Competitive pressures for territorial resources intensified as modern human populations expanded into regions that had supported stable Neanderthal communities for thousands of years. The overlap in subsistence strategies between the two populations created direct competition for hunting territories, raw material sources, and suitable cave sites that provided shelter during harsh winter months. Archaeological evidence indicates that prime territorial locations changed hands repeatedly during the transition period, with some sites showing alternating occupations by different populations over relatively short time intervals. The Vézère Valley in southwestern France exemplifies these competitive dynamics, with numerous caves containing stratigraphic sequences that document the replacement of Mousterian by Aurignacian occupations within a geographically restricted area. Sites such as Abri-Pataud and La Ferracie show clear transitions from Neanderthal to modern human occupation, often with sterile layers indicating periods of abandonment between different occupational phases. The concentration of high-quality flint sources in this region made it particularly valuable territory that attracted repeated occupation attempts by both populations. Genetic analysis of ancient DNA extracted from Neanderthal and early modern human remains has revolutionized understanding of biological interactions between these populations. Initial sequencing of the Neanderthal genome revealed that non-African modern human populations carry 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA, providing direct evidence for interbreeding between the species. This genetic legacy appears in all modern human populations outside Africa, indicating that hybridization occurred before the global expansion of modern humans, rather than through multiple independent contact events. The distribution of Neanderthal genetic variants within modern human genomes reveals complex patterns that reflect both the timing and geographic context of interbreeding events. Certain chromosomal regions show higher concentrations of Neanderthal ancestry, while others appear to have been actively selected against during subsequent evolution. The X chromosome contains significantly less Neanderthal DNA than autosomes, suggesting reduced fertility or survival of male hybrids, a pattern consistent with Haldane's rule regarding hybrid fitness in closely related species. Functional analysis of Neanderthal genetic variants that persist in modern populations reveals their continued adaptive value in certain environments and contexts. Variants affecting immune system function appear to have provided advantages for populations expanding into new disease environments, while others influence skin pigmentation and hair texture in ways that may have been beneficial in northern latitudes. The selective retention of these variants demonstrates that hybridization contributed functional genetic diversity that enhanced modern human adaptability. The geographic pattern of Neanderthal ancestry in modern populations provides insights into the timing and location of interbreeding events. Populations in Europe and Asia show similar levels of Neanderthal ancestry despite their geographic separation, suggesting that most hybridization occurred during early expansion phases, rather than through continued contact in Europe. However, some European populations show slightly elevated Neanderthal ancestry, indicating additional hybridization events during the extended coexistence period in Western Europe. Recent analysis of ancient DNA from early modern European populations has revealed temporal changes in Neanderthal ancestry that reflect population movements and genetic drift during the Paleolithic. Some early European modern humans carried higher levels of Neanderthal DNA than present-day populations, indicating subsequent dilution through population expansion and mixing. These patterns suggest that the genetic legacy of Neanderthal modern human hybridization was more extensive immediately following contact than the current distribution indicates. Archaeological evidence for direct cultural exchange between Neanderthal and modern human populations emerges through analysis of technological innovations and symbolic behaviours that appear in both traditions during the contact period. The appearance of bone tools, personal ornaments and pigment use in late Neanderthal contexts parallel similar developments in early modern human assemblages, suggesting either independent innovation or cultural transmission through observation and imitation. The production of bone tools represents a particularly significant technological development that appears in both Chattel-Perronian and Aurignacian contexts. These implements require different manufacturing techniques compared to traditional stone tool production, involving careful selection of appropriate bones, systematic shaping through abrasion and carving, and often complex hafting arrangements. The similarity in bone tool morphology between late Neanderthal and early modern human assemblages suggests shared technological knowledge or parallel development of similar solutions to functional problems. Personal ornament production shows even more striking parallels between late Neanderthal and early modern human populations. Perforated shells, carved bone pendants, and modified animal teeth appear in both cultural contexts, with similar manufacturing techniques and wear patterns. The transport of marine shells to inland sites located hundreds of kilometres from coastal sources indicates that both populations maintained extensive territorial networks that enabled acquisition of exotic materials for symbolic purposes. Pigment use intensifies dramatically in both Neanderthal and modern human sites during the contact period, with archaeological evidence indicating systematic collection and processing of ochre and other colorants. The grinding stones and processing techniques used for pigment preparation show remarkable similarity between different populations, suggesting either shared knowledge or convergent development of optimal processing methods. The increased frequency of pigment finds during this period may reflect intensified symbolic activities related to group identity maintenance during periods of territorial competition. The spatial organization of activities within cave sites reveals different approaches to site use and resource management that may have influenced competitive outcomes between populations. Modern human sites typically show more structured spatial organization with clearly defined activity areas for different functions, including tool production, food processing, and sleeping zones. This organizational strategy may have enabled more efficient resource use and reduced conflicts within larger residential groups. Neanderthal sites from the same period maintain the smaller scale organization patterns characteristic of earlier periods, with less distinct activity areas and evidence for smaller group sizes. This organizational difference may reflect fundamental differences in social structure that influence competitive capabilities during territorial disputes. The ability to coordinate larger groups effectively would have provided significant advantages in both resource procurement and territorial defense. Subsistence strategies show both continuities and innovations during the contact period, as both populations adapted to changing environmental conditions and competitive pressures. Archaeological assemblages indicate that both Neanderthals and modern humans continue to focus primarily on large game hunting, but with technological innovations that may have improved hunting efficiency. The development of projectile technologies, including spear throwers and possibly early bow systems, appears in modern human contexts and may have provided competitive advantages in hunting success rates. The processing of plant resources shows increased sophistication in both populations during the contact period, with archaeological evidence indicating systematic exploitation of nuts, berries and other plant foods that supplemented meat-based diets. Grinding stones and processing tools for plant preparation become more common in both Neanderthal and modern human assemblages, suggesting either independent development or shared knowledge regarding plant food processing techniques. Settlement pattern analysis reveals different territorial strategies employed by Neanderthal and modern human populations during the coexistence period. Modern human sites show evidence of more extensive territorial networks with longer distance transport of raw materials and more frequent site reoccupation patterns. This territorial organization may have enabled more efficient resource exploitation and provided advantages during periods of environmental stress or resource scarcity. The timing of Neanderthal population decline across different European regions reveals a complex pattern of territorial loss and population retreat that extended over several thousand years. Archaeological evidence indicates that Neanderthal populations persisted longest in southwestern Europe, particularly in the Iberian Peninsula, where geographic barriers may have provided protection from competitive pressures. The latest confirmed Neanderthal sites, dating to approximately 28,000 years ago, cluster in this refugial region, where populations maintained traditional technologies and subsistence strategies. The final phases of Neanderthal occupation show evidence of population fragmentation and cultural simplification that may reflect demographic stress and reduced group sizes. Late Neanderthal assemblages contain fewer tool types and show reduced technological sophistication compared to earlier periods, possibly indicating breakdown of cultural transmission systems as populations became increasingly isolated. These patterns suggest that competitive pressures from modern human expansion created cascading effects that undermined the social and technological systems that had enabled Neanderthal success for hundreds of thousands of years. The final populations of Neanderthals persisted in scattered refugia across southwestern Europe until approximately 40,000 years ago, marking the end of a lineage that had successfully adapted to European environments for over 400,000 years. These last surviving groups concentrated primarily in the Iberian Peninsula, southern France, and isolated pockets throughout the Italian peninsula and Balkans, where geographic barriers and favourable microclimates provided temporary respite from the mounting pressures that had eliminated their populations across most of Europe. Archaeological evidence from sites such as Gorham's Cave in Gibraltar, Zaffaraya Cave in southern Spain, and Grotta di Fumane in northern Italy documents the persistence of traditional Mousterian technologies and subsistence strategies, even as modern human populations dominated surrounding territories. The Iberian Peninsula served as the primary refugium for late-surviving Neanderthal populations, with over 30 sites yielding evidence of occupation dating to the final millennia of their existence. The mountainous terrain of the Pyrenees, Cantabrian Mountains and Betic Cordillera created isolated valleys and cave systems that provided natural fortresses against the advancing modern human populations. These geographic barriers limited access routes and created bottlenecks that may have slowed the expansion of competing populations, while providing Neanderthal groups with defendable territories rich in diverse resources. Gorham's Cave, situated on the southeastern face of the Rock of Gibraltar, represents one of the most extensively studied late Neanderthal sites and provides crucial insights into the final phases of their existence. The cave's strategic location overlooking the Mediterranean provided access to both terrestrial and marine resources, while its elevated position offered protection from sea level fluctuations and potential threats. Excavations have revealed occupation layers spanning from approximately 55,000 to 28,000 years ago, with the uppermost Neanderthal deposits representing some of the latest confirmed evidence for their survival. The artifact assemblages from Gorham's Cave demonstrate remarkable continuity in Neanderthal technological traditions throughout the final occupation phases. Stone tool production maintained the characteristic Levallois reduction techniques and tool morphologies that had characterized Neanderthal industries for tens of thousands of years. The consistency of these technological traditions suggests that late surviving populations maintained cultural knowledge and manufacturing skills, despite their geographic isolation and presumed small population sizes. Subsistence evidence from Gorham's Cave reveals sophisticated exploitation of Mediterranean coastal environments that supplemented traditional hunting strategies with systematic collection of marine resources. Shell middens within the cave deposits contain remains of limpets, mussels, and other intertidal species that provided reliable protein sources during periods when terrestrial game was scarce. The processing techniques evident from shell fragments and associated tools demonstrate detailed knowledge of optimal collection timing and preparation methods for marine foods. The faunal assemblages from late Neanderthal sites across Iberia reveal adaptation to changing prey availability as climatic conditions shifted toward full glacial conditions. Traditional prey species, including red deer, ibex and wild boar, remained important components of the diet, but archaeological evidence indicates increased exploitation of smaller animals including rabbits, birds and reptiles that may have been more readily available as larger game populations declined. This dietary diversification demonstrates behavioural flexibility that enabled survival despite resource limitations. Zaffaraya Cave in the mountains of southern Spain provides additional evidence for late Neanderthal survival in Iberian refugiae. The site's high-altitude location at 1,020 metres elevation offered access to diverse ecological zones, ranging from Mediterranean scrubland to montane forests, enabling exploitation of varied seasonal resources. Radiocarbon dates from the site extend to approximately 30,000 years ago, making it among the latest confirmed Neanderthal occupations in Europe. The stone tool assemblages from Zaffaraya maintain traditional Mousterian characteristics, while showing subtle modifications that may reflect adaptation to local resource availability and environmental conditions. Tool morphology emphasizes robust scrapers and points suitable for processing the tough hides and fibrous plant materials characteristic of high-altitude Mediterranean environments. The raw material sources utilised at the site indicate territorial ranges extending 50 kilometres from the cave, suggesting that even late surviving populations maintained substantial territorial networks. Evidence for symbolic behaviour continues in the latest Neanderthal sites, with pigment use and possible ornament production documented at several locations. Ochre fragments and grinding stones from Gorham's cave indicate continued investment in symbolic activities, despite the presumed demographic stress affecting these populations. The persistence of these behaviours suggests that symbolic expression remained an integral component of Neanderthal culture throughout their final millennia. The demographic structure of late surviving Neanderthal populations likely consisted of increasingly small and isolated groups that faced mounting challenges related to genetic diversity and reproductive success. Population genetic models suggest that effective population sizes may have dropped below sustainable levels in many regions, creating demographic bottlenecks that increased vulnerability to environmental fluctuations and stochastic events. The geographic isolation of refugial populations would have limited opportunities for genetic exchange that could have counteracted these demographic pressures. Climate change during the final phases of Neanderthal occupation created additional stresses that compounded existing demographic and competitive pressures. The transition toward full glacial conditions between 40,000 and 30,000 years ago brought cooler temperatures, reduced precipitation, and vegetation changes that affected prey animal populations and plant food availability. Archaeological evidence indicates that some refugial areas that had previously supported stable populations became marginal or uninhabitable as environmental conditions deteriorated. The Campanian Ignimbrite volcanic eruption, occurring approximately 39,280 years ago, created catastrophic environmental disruption across southeastern Europe that may have eliminated Neanderthal populations in the Balkans and eastern Mediterranean regions. Volcanic ash deposits up to several meters thick buried vegetation and contaminated water sources across extensive areas, while the associated climatic cooling created additional stress for surviving populations. The timing of this eruption coincides closely with the disappearance of Neanderthal populations from many Eastern European sites. Population fragmentation during the final millennia reduced the viability of individual groups and limited their ability to respond effectively to environmental challenges. Archaeological evidence suggests that late Neanderthal populations became increasingly isolated within their refugial territories, with reduced evidence for long-distance transport of raw materials and decreased diversity in tool assemblages. This isolation may have led to breakdown of cultural transmission systems and loss of technological knowledge that had previously enabled successful adaptation to environmental challenges. Competition with expanding modern human populations created additional pressures that may have accelerated Neanderthal population decline through direct territorial displacement and resource competition. Archaeological evidence indicates that modern human populations established settlements in regions adjacent to Neanderthal refugia, potentially limiting access to crucial resources and territory. The demographic advantages of modern human populations, including larger group sizes and more extensive territorial networks, may have provided competitive advantages that gradually reduced Neanderthal territorial holdings. The genetic contributions of Neanderthals to modern human populations outside Africa represent their most enduring legacy, with genomic analysis revealing that contemporary non-African populations carry 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. This genetic inheritance includes functional variants that continue to influence traits including immune system function, skin pigmentation, hair texture, and metabolic processes. The selective retention of certain Neanderthal genetic variants demonstrates their continued adaptive value in modern human populations, particularly those living in northern latitudes where Neanderthal adaptations to cold climates provide ongoing benefits. Immune system genes represent the most significant category of Neanderthal genetic contributions to modern humans, with variants affecting the HLA complex and other immune functions, providing enhanced resistance to pathogens encountered during human expansion into new environments. These genetic contributions may have been crucial for modern human survival and successful colonization of diverse global environments, demonstrating that Neanderthal modern human hybridization provided functional benefits that enhanced human evolutionary success. Recent analysis of ancient DNA from early modern European populations has revealed that Neanderthal genetic contributions were initially higher than present-day levels, indicating subsequent dilution through population expansion and genetic drift. Some early European populations carried up to 6% Neanderthal ancestry, suggesting more extensive hybridization during the initial contact period than previously recognized. The gradual reduction of Neanderthal ancestry in later populations reflects demographic expansion that diluted these genetic contributions while maintaining functional variance under positive selection. The geographic distribution of Neanderthal ancestry in contemporary populations provides insights into the timing and location of hybridization events. European and Asian populations show similar baseline levels of Neanderthal ancestry, indicating that most interbreeding occurred during early expansion phases, rather than through continued contact in Europe. However, some populations show elevated Neanderthal ancestry in specific genomic regions, suggesting additional hybridization events or selective retention of particular genetic variants. The scientific discovery and study of Neanderthals began with the recovery of the first recognized specimen from the Neander Valley in Germany during August 1856. Limestone quarrying operations in the Feldhofer cave exposed skeletal remains that were initially misinterpreted as belonging to a pathological modern human or ancient warrior. The distinctive morphological features of the skull, including prominent brow ridges, low cranial vault, and robust construction, challenged contemporary understanding of human evolution and sparked decades of scientific debate about the antiquity and significance of these remains. Johann Carl Fuhlrott, a local teacher and naturalist, recognized the potential importance of the Neander Valley discovery and collaborated with anatomist Hermann Schaffhausen to conduct the first scientific analysis of Neanderthal remains. Their 1857 publication describing the fossils as representing an extinct human species predating modern populations established the foundation for subsequent paleoanthropological research. However, the interpretation of these remains as representing a distinct species remained controversial for decades, with prominent scientists including Rudolf Virchow arguing that the morphological differences resulted from pathological conditions rather than evolutionary divergence. The acceptance of Neanderthals as a legitimate extinct human species gained momentum through subsequent discoveries at sites throughout Europe during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The La Chapelle aux Saints discovery in 1908 provided the first relatively complete Neanderthal skeleton, enabling detailed anatomical comparisons with modern humans. Marcellin Buller's comprehensive analysis of this specimen, while containing some interpretive errors regarding posture and locomotion, established many of the morphological characteristics that define Neanderthal anatomy. The Spy Cave discoveries in Belgium during 1886 provided crucial evidence for the geological antiquity of Neanderthal, remains through their clear association with extinct Pleistocene fauna and stone tools. The stratigraphic context of these fossils demonstrated that Neanderthals had lived alongside woolly mammoths, cave bears, and other extinct species, confirming their great antiquity and supporting interpretations of them as representing an extinct human lineage rather than pathological modern humans. Technological advances in dating methods during the mid-20th century revolutionized Neanderthal chronology and enabled precise temporal placement of fossil discoveries within Pleistocene geological sequences. Radiocarbon dating, developed during the 1940s, provided the first reliable absolute dates for late Neanderthal sites and confirmed their extinction by approximately 28,000 years ago. Subsequent developments in uranium-thorium dating, electron spin resonance, and other techniques extended the chronological framework for earlier Neanderthal sites and established the temporal depth of their evolutionary lineage. The development of ancient DNA analysis during the 1990s opened unprecedented opportunities for studying Neanderthal genetics and evolutionary relationships. The first successful extraction of mitochondrial DNA from Neanderthal bone samples provided direct genetic evidence for their distinctiveness from modern humans while confirming their close evolutionary relationship. Initial mitochondrial DNA sequences revealed genetic distances that supported species-level separation between Neanderthals and modern humans, though subsequent nuclear DNA analysis has complicated these interpretations. The completion of the first Neanderthal genome sequence in 2010 represented a watershed moment in paleoanthropological research, providing comprehensive genetic data that revolutionized understanding of Neanderthal biology and evolutionary relationships. The genomic analysis revealed evidence for interbreeding between Neanderthals and modern humans, demonstrating that these populations were not completely reproductively isolated, despite their morphological and cultural differences. This discovery fundamentally altered interpretations of human evolution and the relationship between different Pleistocene hominin populations. Advances in ancient DNA extraction and sequencing techniques continue to expand the database of Neanderthal genetic information, with successful DNA recovery from increasingly old and degraded specimens. Recent technical developments have enabled genetic analysis of specimens over 400,000 years old, extending the temporal range of ancient DNA studies deep into Neanderthal evolutionary history. These advances promise to provide detailed insights into population structure, migration patterns, and evolutionary processes that shape Neanderthal populations throughout their existence. Computational modelling and simulation approaches have enhanced understanding of Neanderthal extinction processes by integrating archaeological, genetic, and environmental data within demographic frameworks. These models explore various extinction scenarios, including climate change, competition with modern humans, demographic stochasticity, and volcanic catastrophes to assess their relative contributions to Neanderthal population decline. The results suggest that multiple factors likely interacted to create the conditions that led to Neanderthal extinction, rather than any single cause being solely responsible. Modern analytical techniques including isotopic analysis, microscopic examination of dental calculus, and biomolecular archaeology continue to reveal new aspects of Neanderthal behavior and ecology. Stable isotope analysis of bone collagen provides detailed information about dietary patterns and mobility, while dental calculus preserves microscopic evidence of plant consumption and environmental conditions. These approaches complement traditional archaeological methods by providing direct evidence for behaviours and environmental interactions that leave minimal traces in conventional archaeological assemblages. The integration of multiple analytical approaches within interdisciplinary research frameworks has transformed understanding of Neanderthal capabilities and achievements. Rather than the primitive, brutish stereotypes that dominated early interpretations, contemporary research reveals sophisticated populations with complex technologies, symbolic behaviours, and adaptive capabilities that enabled successful survival in challenging Pleistocene environments for hundreds of thousands of years. Their extinction represents the loss of a remarkable human lineage that contributed significantly to the evolutionary heritage of contemporary human populations, while demonstrating alternative pathways for human, cultural, and biological development. The study of Neanderthals continues to provide crucial insights into human evolution, adaptation, and the factors that influence the survival and extinction of hominin populations. Their remarkable success across vast temporal and geographic scales, followed by their ultimate disappearance, offers important lessons about the complex interactions between environmental change, demographic processes, and evolutionary pressures that shape the trajectory of human lineages. As the closest evolutionary relatives of modern humans, Neanderthals represent an irreplaceable window into our shared evolutionary heritage and the diverse pathways that human evolution has explored throughout its remarkable history.